Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about my week number 1 wide receiver start or sit decisions for fantasy football in 2021. Inside today's video, I'm going to be talking about every single game from Thursday Night Football all the way until Monday Night Football and discuss all of the fantasy football notable wide receivers and be telling you guys whether I believe that you should start or sit the wide receivers in each given matchup. But before we get on in to the breakdown of the wide receiver position, I would like to ask, if you are new to the YouTube channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, to please make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below. Not only is it free, I put out content every single day to help you guys win your 2021 Fantasy Football Championship. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you hit that like button down below to help boost this video up the algorithm so that more beautiful people like yourself can see today's video. I would also like to give you guys a quick word from my friends and my sponsor over at Thrive Fantasy. Thrive Fantasy is a daily fantasy sports and esports app for player props. With Thrive, you can eliminate the countless hours of research and focus only on the top tier athletes that have the biggest impacts on the game. Choose 10 out of the 20 available player props to build your lineup. Each prop is assigned a fantasy value for both the over and the under based upon how likely it is to hit. Hit the most props and rack up the most amount of points to win your share of the prize pool. Thrive's $100,000 guaranteed contest is just $20 to enter, and first place takes home $20,000. Make sure that you guys sign up and use promo code Notorious when you sign up today, and you will receive a 100% instant first deposit match up to $100. Download the Thrive Fantasy app on the App Store or the Play Store, or by visiting their website www.thrivefantasy.com. Sign up and prop up today. And we are back, so without further ado, let's get into the video. We begin with the Thursday Night Football matchup of the Dallas Cowboys going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the reigning Super Bowl champions. Now, this matchup between these two teams involves star-studded wide receivers. It involves wide receivers that you drafted most likely in the first 4 rounds of your 2021 fantasy football draft. Now, early on in the season is when I most advise you guys to just start your studs. Don't try to get too cute. Don't try to make some crazy play because you think they have some super duper high upside in week number 1, some player you drafted in like the 11th round. Don't start that guy in most scenarios over a player that you drafted in the first 4 or 5 rounds of your draft. You drafted Amari Cooper, you drafted CeeDee Lamb, Mike Evans, and Chris Godwin, most likely in the top 4 rounds of your 2021 fantasy football draft. So you're going to start them unless the matchup is completely terrible, which it is not the case for any of these wide receivers. Then you better be starting them in week number 1. Week number 1 is typically the most random week of the season. Crazy shit happens all the time in the NFL, but it especially typically happens in week number 1. While I believe the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have an excellent defense, and this is going to be a tough test for the Dallas Cowboys, would you be surprised if the Cowboys offense lights up the Buccaneers and this is a very high scoring back and forth affair in week number 1? That would not surprise me at all. So I'm going to be starting all of the Dallas Cowboys wide receivers besides Michael Gallup, because I believe that Michael Gallup is the clear number 3 option on this team, and I believe that the Buccaneers are a tougher defense, so there probably will be an odd man out inside of this matchup, and I think the odd man out could be Michael Gallup. So I will be starting both Amari Cooper as well as CeeDee Lamb. You drafted them early on in your fantasy draft, so you better start them here week number 1 on Thursday Night Football. For the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I'm willing to start all 3 wide receivers. I'm starting Mike Evans, I'm starting Chris Godwin, I'm starting Antonio Brown, because I believe the Buccaneers offense is going to be able to go to pound town up against the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys defense is terrible. The Buccaneers offense is amazing. Both of those things combined together makes a very good matchup for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense. I expect all 3 of these wide receivers to finish inside the top 32, and I would not be surprised at all if both Mike Evans as well as Chris Godwin were top 12 wide receivers on the week. Now we move to the Sunday slate. We begin with the Seattle Seahawks at the Indianapolis Colts. In this matchup, I like both the Seattle Seahawks wide receivers, DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. Now, the Indianapolis Colts defense definitely isn't terrible, but again, it's another case of you start the studs. You start DK Metcalf and you start Tyler Lockett. You didn't draft DK Metcalf in the 2nd or 3rd round to sit him. You didn't draft Tyler Lockett in the 4th or 5th round of your draft to sit them. Now, this is a game that I am going to be watching personally with a keen eye, because I am someone who is a doubter of DK Metcalf, who is a doubter of Tyler Lockett, because we saw last season that when one of these players does really good, for instance, DK Metcalf has a really good game, then Tyler Lockett typically shrivels up and doesn't play too well. The opposite also could happen, where Tyler Lockett has a huge game, then DK Metcalf doesn't really do anything. So I want to see how this game looks. Do they look to be the run-heavy team that I believe they were going to be going into the season? Maybe they will, maybe they won't. I want to see how consistent these wide receivers can be. Can DK Metcalf have a good game while Lockett's having a good game? Can Lockett have a good game while DK Metcalf is having a good game? We're going to see this in week number 1, but you drafted him early on. You drafted him with confidence, so start DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett up against the Indianapolis Colts. Now, I know a lot of people are going to be on the Michael Pittman Jr. bandwagon for week number 1 up against the Seattle Seahawks defense, and I somewhat understand it. But for the Indianapolis Colts, I have zero fucking idea who the number 1 wide receiver on this team is. T.Y. Hilton is hurt, so it's not going to be him. Could it be Michael Pittman? Could it be Zach Pascal? Or could it be some other wide receiver on this roster that wasn't even notable enough to crack this video, but maybe they are the number 1 wide receiver here in Indianapolis on the week? That's going to be a very interesting storyline to follow as well, because if Michael Pittman wasn't drafted in your league, I know he was probably drafted in your league, but Zach Pascal is on a majority of waiver wire, so will he be able to elevate and take that number 1 target role inside of this offense? That's why you got to go ahead and watch these games. That's why I recap the games at the end of the week. This is a very key game, for my opinion, at least on the 2021 fantasy football season. So again, we're going to be starting DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett and sitting down both of the notable Indianapolis Colts wide receivers. Next matchup here, we got the Jacksonville Jaguars at the Houston Texans. Now, this is going to be a terrible game. I expect the Jaguars to win this one, going up against the Tyrod Taylor-led Houston Texans. While I knew that Tyrod Taylor was probably going to be the starting quarterback of the team, there was something in me that told me that maybe Deshaun Watson would somehow be able to play, and something else told me that maybe Davis Mills would be the starting quarterback, but of course, they go for Tyrod Taylor. And while I think Tyrod Taylor is a perfectly fine NFL quarterback, that does damage a bit of my expectations for Brandon Cooks. Now, Brandon Cooks was a guy that was severely underdrafted last year. This year, he's getting drafted outside of the top 10 rounds. So this is not really a start your stud matchup, but this is a start the number 1 wide receiver on a team up against a bad defense matchup. So I like Brandon Cooks here up against the not so hot Jacksonville Jaguars defense, even if I don't love Tyrod Taylor as the starting quarterback. Now, for the Jacksonville Jaguars, it is just like with the Indianapolis Colts. I want to see in this game, with Marvin Jones healthy, with DJ Chark healthy, and with Laviska Shenault in the game, who is the number 1 wide receiver for Trevor Lawrence? Who is going to be the guy seeing a majority of the targets? If you guys watched my content in the offseason, I was banging the drum for Marvin Jones. So I personally believe in this game, up against a garbage-ass Houston Texans defense, that Marvin Jones should be able to go to Pound Town as the lead wide receiver on this team. That has been my belief all offseason. It's my belief right now. So Marvin Jones is a start, and I'm going to be sitting down DJ Chark as well as Laviska Shenault. If you're in a deeper league, I did talk about drafting Nico Collins, but I want to see how involved he is in this offense in this game. He is a guy that basically goes in undrafted in drafts, so he's not a guy I'm looking to be starting in week number 1. Next game here, we got the Philadelphia Eagles at the Atlanta Falcons. This is a matchup that I'm super excited for because I believe this is going to be a certified barn burner, a back and forth affair between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons defense might have gotten slightly better. Who cares? In reality, the defense is not very good. The Eagles defense improves maybe slightly, still not very good. And we got the Atlanta Falcons offense. Sure, they don't have Julio Jones, still should be a good offense. The Eagles offense, sure, I'm not 100% sold in on Jalen Hurts, but I think he's a good enough quarterback with the weapons there to have a very, very high-scoring game here with 2 bad defenses, with 2 solid offenses. It makes for a match made in heaven for fantasy football. So for the Eagles, I'm firing out there Devontae Smith, wide receiver of the Philadelphia Eagles. While he didn't have too much time in preseason due to injury, I'm going to believe that he is the true number 1 target in Philadelphia. So that's why I'm going to fire him out in this game. The Falcons, Calvin Ridley, and Russell Gage are in smash matchups. I think Kyle Pitts is going to have a great game as well, but Man, I mean, you drafted Calvin Ridley in the second round, so you were going to start him anyways, but this is the perfect start for the season for Calvin Ridley. And for those of you who waited later in drafts and drafted the number 2 wide receiver in Atlanta in Russell Gage, you are going to be very excited about this matchup and the performance that I believe he will put up against the Philadelphia Eagles. For sit, I'm going to be sitting down Jalen Reagor. Now, he did show some flashes in preseason, in training camp, but I still believe Devontae Smith is the number 1 target there for Jalen Hurts. Could things change? If Jalen Reagor is the guy in this matchup, then we see it happen again in week number 2, then I'll switch these guys. I'll go ahead and tell you to start Jalen Reagor every week and to bench Devontae Smith, but with my assumptions right now, I have Devontae Smith as the best wide receiver on the Philadelphia Eagles. Next up, we got the LA Chargers at the Washington football team. I want to be starting both of the wide receivers that you guys drafted early on in your fantasy drafts, Keenan Allen as well as Terry McLaurin. Now, while it's going to be very interesting to see what Ryan Fitzpatrick looks like for the Washington football team, what Justin Herbert the pervert is going to do in week number 1 up against a tough defense, I do worry that this isn't going to be a very high-scoring game, that this game may be a lower-scoring affair because the Chargers defense, when healthy, is dangerous. The Washington football team defense, when healthy, is amazing, so this could be a relatively low-scoring affair, but you drafted Keenan Allen early, you drafted Terry McLaurin early, you're going to go ahead and assume that they should be able to do just fine in a matchup that will be potentially lower scoring. I'm going to be sitting down Mike Williams as well as Curtis Samuel. Curtis Samuel was a guy that was completely off my board in fantasy football drafts in this matchup up against the Chargers. I am going to be sitting him down with Mike Williams. I'm interested to see what he does in week number 1 because he's a guy who hasn't really put it all together in his career. He's had that one big season where he had over 1,000 receiving yards. And then he had the other season where he had over 10 touchdowns. But he can't really combine the two. He's never really had 900 yards and 9 touchdowns or something that could really elevate him to fantasy football stardom. Will he be able to do it this season? Maybe, but in week number 1, I'm going to be sitting him up against the Washington football team. But before we get on into the next matchup, I'd like to ask if you are new to the channel and you have enjoyed the video thus far, to please make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below. Make sure you hit that like button as well. Next matchup here, we got the Steelers at the Buffalo Bills, and I know people are not going to like this one, but I love Deontay Johnson in this matchup. I've talked about Deontay Johnson all offseason. This guy is the number 1 target in Pittsburgh. Big Ben and him, they love each other. It is a connection like Big Ben to Antonio Brown. Now, I'm not saying Deontay Johnson is fucking Antonio Brown, but what I'm saying is that Deontay Johnson is going to be seeing an ass load of targets in this game up against the Buffalo Bills. Even if the Bills have a tougher defense with the amount of targets, he should be perfectly fine in this matchup. And obviously, you're going to be starting Stephon Diggs, one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, even if this is a tougher matchup up against the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. But are we going to be seeing TJ Watt play in this game? I don't know, because it appears that he wants to hold out until he gets that new contract. Will he get it before Sunday? I don't know, but that is something interesting to follow. For the sits, I'm going to be sitting down Chase Claypool, as well as Mr. Corvette, Mr. TikTok dance himself, Juju Smith-Schuster. Now, if you guys have been watching my videos all offseason, I'm completely out on Juju Smith-Schuster. I don't expect him to be very good in this game. Chase Claypool is one of those sits where I'd understand if you wanted to argue with me, hey, I want to start Chase Claypool because I have these other wide receivers that I don't like as much as him, and sure, that is fine. But again, the reason why I like Deontay Johnson so much in this matchup is because I believe the volume is going to be there. Maybe the volume isn't there as much for Chase Claypool in this matchup because they tried to establish the run early on with Najee Harris, and he's not getting as much volume. Then maybe he falls apart in this game, so I'm going to be sitting him in week number 1. And I'm also going to be sitting down Cole Beasley, wide receiver of the Buffalo Bills. Next up, we got the 49ers at the Detroit Lions. Now, Brandon Ayuk is dealing with an injury right now. It is pretty unclear if he's going to be healthy and good to go for week number 1 or not. Now, all signs are pointing towards him being perfectly fine for week number 1. But if I'm Kyle Shanahan, if I'm the 49ers, why are you going to risk re-injury a couple days out up against the Detroit Lions? Why? You could literally play Deebo Samuel and George Kittle, and you'll be just fine. You could just run the ball every single play up against the Detroit Lions, and you'll probably score 49 points, just like what is the name of their team. The Lions are a bad defense. This is going to be a murder on the gridiron. So I'm starting Deebo and Brandon Ayuk But make sure you monitor Brandon Ayuk. I will be dropping a wide receiver rankings video closer to Sunday, so there will be kind of updates on Brandon Ayuk in that video and how confident I am in him. If he plays, you're starting him, though, because he can absolutely eviscerate the Lions defense. Deebo Samuel, the exact same thing. He is healthy. He is good to go. If Ayuk sits, I'm moving him even further up the rankings for the week. For the Lions, we got Terrell Williams. We got Amon-Ra St. Brown. We got Quintez Cephus. All wide receivers that could be the wide receiver one of this team. It's similar with the Colts that we talked about early on. I want to see who the wide receiver number one is. Now, if I had to lay a bet down, I would tell you that I believe it's going to be Tyrell Williams. I talked about him in yesterday's waiver wire ad video, as he's a guy that I want to add, stash on the bench, and then wait to see what happens in week number 1. Could he become the number 1 target? I believe so. Now, this isn't going to be the greatest showing regardless, because the 49ers defense is really good. But we will be seeing the target numbers and as well as the kind of snap count for each wide receiver, and that's what really going to be able to tell us who the lead dog is here in Detroit. Next up, we got the Minnesota Vikings at the Cincinnati Bengals. Just like with the Philadelphia Eagles and the Atlanta Falcons, this is another game. This is my game of the week, if I'm being honest with you guys. Now, I'm a Dolphins fan. That's the game that I'm going to be keeping the closest eye on. But if I had to pick another game that was my favorite team, it's the Vikings at the Bengals. This is going to be crazy. The Vikings offense is stacked. Dalvin Cook, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen. The Bengals, they got Joe Burrow back. They got Jamar Chase. They got Tyler Boyd. They got T. Higgins. Now you might be thinking, Nick, you just said that Jamar Chase, he's part of this star-studded offense, but why is he not a start for the week? Because this guy fucking sucked in preseason. In training camp, he could not get separation against the Bengals defense. And the Bengals defense isn't very good. The Vikings defense isn't very good either. So could Jamar Chase show out, completely fool me in week number 1? 100%, but I wouldn't bet on it. I'd much rather play T. Higgins or Tyler Boyd in this matchup up against the Vikings defense. Justin Jefferson, obviously, you drafted him to be a top 10 wide receiver. You're going to play him up against the garbage-ass Bengals. And Adam Thielen, who is a guy that I wasn't actively fading in drafts, but was a guy that I started to kind of fall out of favor with, because I realized that, hey, the reason why his numbers were so high last season is because he scored so many touchdowns. And it was so clear in my mind that that number was going to go down because Irv Smith was going to be this huge target hog in the red zone. But then Irv Smith gets hurt. They bring in Chris Herndon, who might fill the void slightly. But maybe Thielen does end up scoring a shit ton of touchdowns again. Jefferson scores a bunch of touchdowns. This seems like a very good matchup for both teams, aside from Jamar Chase, because I just don't trust him enough to roll him out this week. Next matchup, we got the New York Football Jets at the Carolina Panthers. I like DJ Moore as well as Robbie Anderson for the Carolina Panthers, but I would put most of my trust in DJ Moore. I am not someone who is clamoring for Robbie Anderson. I see a lot of fantasy analysts. Now, it's nothing against them. You could have a different opinion than me, and it could be 100% right, and I was wrong. That's what's going to happen. Just like in these videos, if you have a different opinion than me, you can leave it down in the comment section. I don't want you guys to think that I'm just telling you exactly what to do. You can stray away from my opinion as well, but I'm just not 100% sure about Robbie Anderson. I think that DJ Moore is the clear number 1 wide receiver in this offense, but maybe that connection with mono man Sam Darnold and Robbie Anderson reigns true from the days in New York, and Robbie Anderson's great as well, so I will start him here up against the New York Football Jets in a double revenge game. Robbie Anderson may put up 7 million points, as will potentially Sam Darnold. I love revenge game narratives. I feel like Sam Darnold is going to lay the pipe to the New York Football Jets defense. Corey Davis for the Jets, he's a start. Zach Wilson was force-feeding this guy in preseason. It was crazy. It really was. Zach Wilson was barely playing snaps in these preseason games. Same with Corey Davis, but every time they were on the field together, Corey Davis was getting peppered, Salt Bae style, with targets just drizzling his way. So I love Corey Davis inside this matchup up against the Carolina Panthers. For sits, we're going to go with Elijah Moore. Now, he is a hot name in fantasy football as a sleeper, but he was hurt basically all of the preseason. Week 1, he should be good to go now. It's not even 100% set in stone that he's going to play in week number 1, but I would assume so. But I would sit him in this matchup. And Terrence Marshall Jr. is a guy a lot of people are talking up for the Carolina Panthers, but he's the wide receiver 3 on the team. Sure, if Anderson or Moore were to get hurt, or maybe just Sam Darnold doesn't like throwing to Moore or Anderson, he prefers to throw it to Marshall, then maybe I'll start him next week, but we're going to have to definitely test the waters this week before I make some crazy claims about Terrace Marshall. Next up, we got the Arizona Cardinals at the Les Titans. For the Arizona Cardinals, you're going to be starting DeAndre Hopkins. Obviously, not too hard to dive into that. He's an elite wide receiver, so you play him. A.J. Brown, elite wide receiver, so guess what? You play him. Julio Jones wasn't drafted as an elite wide receiver. In my opinion, he has top 12 potential for the season up against the Cardinals defense. Guess what? You start him. And I'm going to be sitting all the other Arizona Cardinals wide receivers. I'm sitting AJ Green, I'm sitting Christian Kirk, and I'm sitting Rondell Moore. And the funniest part about this is I can see it right now. I'm rubbing the crystal ball. I'm having a vision like I'm That So Raven, and I can just see exactly what's going to happen in this game. Christian Kirk is going to potentially, I'm just going to say that he will, for the sense of this joke, because it's hilarious. Because what's going to happen is Christian Kirk is going to go absolutely apeshit on the Titans defense. I'm talking about 25 plus points, a Tyreek Hill pop-off, game-breaking-esque performance. No one's going to start him, because why the fuck would you start Christian Kirk in this matchup? And then guess what? In week number 2, when everyone's thinking, you know what? It's finally Christian Kirk's season. We've thought for years that it was his time. It's finally coming. And then guess what's going to happen? In week number 2, this man is going to put up a goose egg for fantasy football. I just see that coming from a mile away. I'm not sure if that's going to happen right now, but it's definitely going to happen at some point in this season, because guess what? Every single year that happens with Christian Kirk. Next up, we got the Cleveland Browns at the Kansas City Chiefs. A rematch of one of the better playoff matchups last season. Obviously, it wasn't amazing because Mahomes got hurt, but the Chiefs still ended up winning the game because of that bogus kind of call, the helmet-to-helmet hit. That wasn't called, but it is what it is. I'm not a fan of the Browns or the Chiefs, so it doesn't really matter to me. I'm just talking about the officiating in the NFL, which is piss poor. So in this game, I'm starting Tyreek Hill. You're starting Tyreek Hill every week. The Cleveland Browns have a relatively decent defense, but this could be a higher scoring game. Now, I know I said this could be a higher scoring game. Nick, why are you sitting Odell and Jarvis? The thing is, I just don't trust Odell Beckham Jr. I never have. If you want a safe play, then you play Jarvis Landry, because he's going to get you like 10, 11 points in this game, but he has no upside. That's the thing about Jarvis Landry, is his big game is like 15 points, his bad game is like 9 points. And you never really get that 25 plus point performance. Even if Odell was hurt, Odell was out, that's not what's going to happen, because the Cleveland Browns are a run-heavy team. Even if this is a high-scoring game, you better believe Kevin Stefanski is going to pound the rock down the throat of the Kansas City Chiefs defense. So, with that said, I'm not starting Odell or Jarvis Landry. If you like Odell, if you drafted him in the 5th round, if you believe that there's an Odell Beckham Jr. comeback season, then you better start him up against the Kansas City Chiefs. But if you're in my standpoint, if you're in the boat with me, who doesn't love Odell Beckham Jr., then you're sitting him in this matchup. And don't let anyone tell you to start McCole Hardman this week because, oh, this is the hot matchup up against the Browns. He's going to torch them. Let me tell you, McCole Hardman is going to have 3 good games this season, and maybe it's this week up against the Cleveland Browns. And if it is, I hope it is, because if you have McCole Hardman and he absolutely butt-fucks the Cleveland Browns, then you better get on your phone, call up every single league mate in your league, and tell them that you want to trade them McCole Hardman, because McCole Hardman is the second coming of Tyreek Hill. He's all this, he's all that, because he is one of those wide receivers that will have those amazing games, and then the rest of the season, he's fucking sleeping like he's on a Tempur-Pedic mattress. I was not drafting McCole Hardman, and I'm certainly not playing him in this matchup. Next up, we got my favorite matchup of the week, like I said, my Miami Dolphins at the New England Patriots. Now, as a Dolphins fan, the Dolphins are underdogs in this game. Dolphins by 7. Let me just tell you, this is going to be a mollywhopping, not a mollywhopping, right, because just by 7, of Mac Jones's sorry ass. Now, in reality, is that what's going to happen? Probably not, because the Patriots at home, they always beat the Dolphins. The Dolphins at home typically beat the Patriots. It's kind of a tradition there for these AFC East teams. But these are 2 ultra tough defenses against the pass. Now, Stephon Gilmore is not playing for the Patriots, so maybe one of these Dolphins receivers pops off. But without Will Fuller, I'm not too sure how this game is going to go. I think it's going to be relatively low scoring. I think the Patriots' rushing attack, we're going to talk about Damian Harris in a video later, is going to be very successful because the Dolphins don't have a great rushing defense. They're not good at defending the run. But against the pass, they're pretty solid. And I think Mac Jones struggles this game up against Xavier Howard, up against Byron Jones. Doesn't sound great for Mac Jones, so I'm sitting Jacoby Myers and Nelson Aguilar. I like both of them on a season-long standpoint, but up against the Dolphins, I think this is going to be lower scoring. Same thing goes with Devontae Parker. As a Dolphins fan, I hate Devontae Parker. He had one good season with Fitzpatrick. It's because Fitzpatrick locks on to a receiver. Could have been anyone, but it was Devontae Parker. He has the great year. I don't like him. Jalen Waddle, very interested to see what he could do in his rookie season, but in this matchup up against the Deflatriots, that is going to be a no for me. Next up, we got the Denver Broncos at the New York Giants. This is going to be a game that is an absolute snooze fest. I'm talking about, you could put this game on. If you have children at your house, you have a baby, you know what you could do? You can put that shit on the screen. It's like a lullaby to them. It is so boring. Nothing is going to happen. I tweeted this out yesterday or the day before. You can follow me on Twitter if you want, at NotoriousFNTSY, that I believe that the Giants may legitimately not score more than 7 points in this game. The Broncos defense is legit. The Giants have a decent defense. This is going to be a low-scoring game, but I'm still going to fire up both the Broncos receivers because I believe in them. Courtland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy, two receivers I was banging the drum for all offseason. I am still confused as to why Vic Fangio elected to make Teddy two gloves, Teddy checkdowns, Teddy Bridgewater the starting quarterback. If I'm the coach, I'm going with the more higher upside in Horsecock Drew Lock. Now, again, I'm not the coach, so it is what it is. Courtland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy, they have fine matchups this week, so I'm willing to start them. But if you have other players, I'd probably lean them over Courtland Sutton or Jerry Jeudy. For the Giants, Kenny Golladay is going to be good to go for week 1, but I am very nervous about this because the Broncos defense is good and because he hasn't been healthy at all in the offseason, really. So I think it'll be a slower start to the season for Kenny Golladay. I think he'll eventually catch on, but right at the beginning of the season, unless he just blows up against the Broncos, I probably will tell you to sit him again in week number 2. I'm also going to be sitting down Sterling Shepard of the New York Football Giants. While he may be looked at as the wide receiver 1 in this game, with Daniel Jones as the quarterback against the Broncos, that's a no from me. I'm like the guy from fucking Shark Tank. Who is that? This is that. That's a no from me. And KJ Hamler for the Broncos, he flashed. He's like the Flash, I guess, in preseason. Looked good. He's fast as fuck, Lightning McQueen. But he is the wide receiver 3. And the Giants defense isn't terrible, so I think KJ Hamler... Well, I mean, I really would have liked KJ Hamler if Locke was the quarterback, but Teddy Bridgewater doesn't take that, fuck it, he's out there somewhere, toss to KJ Hamler deep down the field like a guy like Drew Lock would. Next matchup here, we got the Packers at the Saints, but it's really the Packers at the Saints at Jacksonville because they're playing in the Jaguars Stadium, which is a normal climate for Mr. Jameis Winston. Maybe he can go ahead and find some crabs after this game. So we got Devontae Adams of the Green Bay Packers. Obvious start. My number 1 wide receiver ranked for fantasy football this year, so I'm excited to see what he does up against the Saints, even though they have a tougher defense. Marquez Callaway of the New Orleans Saints, I like as well. Now again, Jameis is without Michael Thomas for probably 6, 7, 8, 9 weeks of the season, so Callaway filled that role really good in preseason. Will it be able to work week 1 up against the Packers? Hopefully. And the hope is that this is a very high-scoring game because that is how Vegas sees it via the over-under total on the week for the Packers at Saints game. So I'm willing to fire up Marquez Callaway in this game. The other Packers, though, they're certified sits. Randall Cobb, Marquez Callaway, any other wide receiver you can name for the Green Bay Packers that got some hype up in the offseason, they're sits until we can see who the clear wide receiver 2 is. And guess what? The answer is probably going to be, it's going to be a different motherfucker every single week for the Packers. And then for the Saints, Traquan Smith, I honestly thought he would be the number 1 target there in New Orleans, but it turned out it's going to be Callaway. So stray away from Mr. Traquan Smith. Next game here, we got the Chicago Bears at the LA Rams. Now, I know some people are going to try to sit Allen Robinson because, oh God, man, he's playing up against Jalen Ramsey. Oh, no. But guess what, man? Jalen Ramsey's a fucking pussy, if we're being honest with you. Now, obviously, me and Jalen Ramsey went to square up. Jalen Ramsey would beat the brakes off of me. But in reality, he doesn't shadow people. He doesn't follow the number 1 wide receiver. He'll probably shadow Darnell Mooney for some reason and lock Darnell Mooney down. So sit Darnell Mooney in this matchup because this is a tough matchup up against the Rams. But Allen Robinson will be perfectly fine. Whether Ramsey is on him or not, he should still be fine in this matchup. For the Rams, the Bears defense is tough, but with Stafford there, your expectation has to be that the Rams win this game. Robert Woods as well as Cooper Kupp are going to be starts in this matchup. They were also players that you drafted very on in your fantasy draft. And like I said, you're going to sit down Darnell Mooney because we all know that Jalen Ramsey is going to go ahead and try to shadow Darnell Mooney. Even though he won't do that, he'll just sit there on the one side of the field the whole game, and if Allen Robinson just moves slightly away from him, he goes and cowers in the corner. Again, I think Jalen Ramsey is very talented. Probably one of the best defensive backs in the league, if not the best. But let's be honest, he's kind of scared of guarding a guy like Allen Robinson. Final matchup here. That was Sunday Night Football. Now we got Monday Night Football. Now, why did they remove the Monday Night Football doubleheader? I was so excited to see double games on Monday night. I was like, oh man, maybe we'll have the Chiefs play someone on Monday night, and then we get another Monday night game. That's my favorite part about week 1. Obviously, it sucks because you have to stay up until like 1 in the morning to watch the games, but it's also awesome because you get that double pump of football on Monday, then you head into the week, and then just a couple days later, there's Thursday Night Football. It's amazing. But instead, the NFL decides to fuck us over, and we don't get to see another game here. So we got the Ravens at the Raiders. This is a game with a relatively high expected point total, but through the air, I have no idea who the clear number 1 is on either of these teams. Hollywood Brown gets so much hype up every offseason, he's always a swing and a miss. Not starting him here. Sammy Watkins. This is Sammy Watkins territory to have an absolutely explosive game. So if you have balls the size of the fucking iceberg that sank the Titanic, then start Sammy Watkins in this matchup. Sorry about my stomach growling. You could probably hear that. Sammy Watkins up against the Raiders. This man always dominates a week number 1 besides last year. Him and Deshaun Jackson are the kings of week number 1. Henry Ruggs and Bryan Edwards. I don't know who the number 1 target's going to be here. The Ravens defense is kind of tough. So I'm sitting both of them. But maybe we get that affirmation that, hey, it is Bryan Edwards season. And then next week, I switch my opinion, and we're starting Bryan Edwards every week. Or maybe maybe everything clicks, and Henry Ruggs is the guy. Henry Ruggs is Tyreek Hill, like they were talking about him being. Then go ahead, start him next week. But for week number 1, I'm staying very cautious in this Monday Night Football matchup for the pass catchers. So thank you guys all for watching. Actually, that's a lie because I really like Darren Waller and I really like Mark Andrews in this game. But they're not wide receivers. They're tight ends. So we're going to be talking about in a video in a couple of days. Thank you guys all so much for watching this video. If you did end up enjoying, please make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below. Again, not only is it free, I put out this content every single day to help you guys win your 2021 Fantasy Football Championship. And while you're down there, make sure you hit that like button as well to help boost this video up the algorithm so that more beautiful people like yourself can see today's video. I love you guys all. Make sure that you stay safe. Happy Titty Tuesday, baby!